Are we finally looking at the end of passwords? Have you noticed passkeys over in Google? Listen, folks, this is the next generation of what used to be passwords, and it is safer and faster to log in. It seems like every few weeks there's a study that comes out looking at what are the top problems people have when it comes to cybersecurity. Problems that they might not need to have if they had done things right. And as you know, it's difficult sometimes to do the whole cybersecurity thing. I was on a webinar with CISA, which is this federal government agency for cybersecurity, and going over with them just all the things that are going on. What should we do? What should we do with this? What tools are available? How do we check this? And, I've been doing cybersecurity for decades now myself, personally. And my company provides cybersecurity for a lot of different companies and has over the years. And that webinar that I was on was overwhelming, even to me. There were a couple of acronyms they were using. Yeah, it's federal government, right? So, these TLAs and acronyms are what the government is made of, right? You can't be a bureaucrat unless you can rattle off various and sundry letters all in some sort of a random order, right? And somehow sound like you know what you're talking about. So if you have one of those jobs, you know what I'm talking about here. It gets very confusing, but it's all very, very overwhelming. And yet some of the most basic things that really should be done are not that easy to do. So for instance, number one is your password. Now, he had some really interesting statistics, and one of them was, successful hacks. What percentage of successful hacks can be directly attributed to what technique? Which technique? From the bad guys. And over half of the successful hacks were, drumroll please, passwords were compromised. Now, think about that for a minute. Over half, I think it was like 52 or 54% of all successfully hacked systems were hacked because of the password. So let's talk about that for a minute. What he also showed in the statistics, and this is the first year we've ever seen statistics like this, was that about 70% of all of the passwords that are out on the dark web, in other words, passwords that have been compromised, they were stolen, etc., about 70% of them are actually unique. Now, we talked before about admin 123 being a password that's very, very common, and that password is often used by things like your home router or maybe your small business router, just using default passwords, default usernames. Well, those are repeated, aren't they? But when you talk about over 70% of all of the passwords that are out there on the dark web being unique, it really makes you think twice. So the bad guys have your username, which is usually your email address, and they have your password. And what they do then is they try and use that at various sites online. They might use it at your bank or a bank and see if it works. That's called password stuffing, where they're just kind of randomly trying all of these stolen email addresses and passwords in order to try and break into something. But it's difficult, right? How do you keep track of unique passwords that you have for all of the different sites? And I have some friends that have their own little techniques, and when you go and look it up on haveibeenpwned.com, Troy Hunt's website, and you put password in, and I trust Troy, by the way, I trust that website to put your information in to have it checked. But when you look at Troy Hunt's website with their supposedly unique passwords, guess what? They aren't that clever after all. So you need a unique password for every site so that the bad guys can't do this password stuffing technique because they've stolen your username and your password from some other website. And you don't want to have the same one on multiple websites because then they can try it again on that. So how do you do that? Well, you can do it like my dad was doing, which completely failed on him because it was stolen. He kept all of his usernames and passwords in a spreadsheet. And of course, that's a very bad idea when that spreadsheet is stolen, which is exactly what ended up happening to him, right? So you have a stolen spreadsheet with all your usernames and passwords. You can bet that's going to end up on the dark web, and they sell it. And it was interesting, too, looking at what the value of some of these things were online. The tools that are being used to hack you. It's cheap. For a few $100 and no programming experience, you can buy software on the dark web that lets you break into systems. It's that easy. It's that cheap. So if you want to try and keep different passwords, what have I been saying for a very long time? What do? Well, I use a password manager, and I've been using them for probably a good 20 years, probably more than that, frankly. But a password manager lets you keep a password for each site, maybe has some secure note, and as part of that password information, of course, it's keeping it secret, right? Because it's got to keep it secret. It's encrypted and might be stored locally. It might be stored in the cloud. You know that I use 1Password. By far, it is the best overall out there right now. You can get a family version of it, individual. We use them for businesses, right? 1Password's quite good, quite good. Now, that is one thing, but it's confusing. I sat down with a buddy of mine who had paychecks stolen because of this very thing. His password had been leaked online, and it was on the dark web, and bad guys used it in order to get into his employer's account for him, right? So, his paycheck information, and they changed the account number to deposit the money into. And of course, the money is long gone, but that's what they did. So now what happens here for this guy? So I helped him get it all back. And then we sat down with 1Password and tried to work our way through all of that. And he's 75 at the time. So it's confusing, right? He's not a tech guy. He loves to play with technology, but it's very, very confusing. So what do you do? How do you do that? How do you keep all of those passwords? I'm looking right now in my password manager, and I have about, what is it? It's over 2,000 unique items in there. Isn't that crazy? So it's all kinds of passwords. It's all kinds of logins. It's just all of this wonderful information that I've been storing in there that is being kept safe. Confusing, right? He's 75. Heck, I know people in their 30s that have a hard time with stuff like this, right? So it's not his fault. Well, that's what's happening now. It's happening. Yeah, passwords. They are going bye-bye. There's a group that we've been talking about for more than a decade called FIDO, F-I-D-O, online. And they've had some really great progress in passwords and in these keys. So you can have a nice little key. In fact, I have one that works on Bluetooth, that has USB on it. You can plug it in, and it's something you have, right? Because we've said this before. The best account, the best type of security is something you have along with something you know, right? Well, I don't use that as much as I probably should use that little crypto key, because what happens if I lose my crypto key? How do I recover things? In fact, we had that problem not too long ago with one of our employees. How do you recover it? What if the employee leaves and takes their little key with them? We know a client of ours who had that very thing happen, right? Gets very confusing very fast. It gets to be a real big problem. Passkeys are the latest thing that's going to help you keep yourself safe online. Now, they're supported by, right now, at least a couple of dozen companies as the primary method for logging in. And those companies include Google, by the way, PayPal apps, Shopify, Instacart, Kayak. I don't know if I've ever used them before. I've had them on the show, but Kayak can be a great place to find good deals on travel and things. Robinhood, Adobe, Microsoft, LinkedIn and video, WhatsApp, Apple, Uber, Twitter. Here's what it is. passkeys allow you to use something like your phone, which has one of these face identification things on it. If it's an iPhone, you've got a good one. If it's a Google, you may or may not have a good one. Same thing with the fingerprinting, and you can use that now to not only identify you with a passcode, but you don't even have to put in your username anymore. It gets to be that simple. And you can get really easy ways of logging in, including on your keyboard. So, for instance, I'm sitting here in front of my computer, and it's got a fingerprint scanner right on the keyboard. I can use that to authenticate myself. So now you don't have to remember 2,000 different passwords, different accounts for all these different websites. It's now built in, and it's rethink hack proof, at least for the time being, right, until proven otherwise. But it is a godsend for all of us, whether you're 75 or you're 30. You no longer have to mess around so much with keeping tabs on your passwords and username. So have a look for that. Google's really pushing it right now, and you might have noticed that on Google if you try and log in. And I have been using it on a few sites, just trying it out for y'all since it was introduced in beta. I think it was March of 23 or maybe May, can't remember now, but check it out. Passkeys, much easier, faster, and more secure than passwords. Visit me online, craigpeterson.com. AI, of course, has been the talk of the town since late 2022 when OpenAI came out with their first AI. And man, we could talk about this for a very long time. But what I want to get into is this study that came out from Rand Corporation. The researchers have been looking into some of these large language models, which are colloquially, if you will, known as AI. And it is kind of interesting when they dig into it deeper. Now, if you've used it for a while, you know ChatGPT 3.5 was a very good large language model, and it lets you type in questions and get answers. It can do all kinds of wonderful things for you, including writing sections of books, writing computer code, doing a whole bunch of things. And then they came out with later versions, of course, ChatGPT 4, and you've got more stuff with DALL-E and various other things. All of these have improved in some ways the way you can either create computer pictures, generative AI, or the way you can have these questions answered, etc., etc. But there are some problems. And it was noticed right away. So immediately, OpenAI started hiring people. They have over 5,000 people in Africa that are sitting there all day long looking at questions and answers and feeding it data. So they'll say things like, hey, if someone asks for a great joke about this, give them this, right? So that, that part of it is obviously nothing to do with AI. It has to do with human programmers. And 5,000 of these guys and gals working for, I don't know how long, months, a year, maybe more, working on this stuff has really put some boundaries on it. Because what they wanted to do is make sure that you could not ask it a question that would result in the AI giving you some information to do something that might be illegal. So, for instance, they've gone in and they've tried to make it so it wasn't sexist. Google, some years ago now, had an AI going on for images, and it had a really hard time in some images differentiating people from various apes and other animals, right? Because they're not smart. They're not people, right? You can show a child a picture of a great ape, and the child will, from that moment on, recognize it. A cat, a dog, a person, right? It doesn't take much for the human brain to figure this stuff out, but it's difficult for the AI. So Google pulled that almost right away because it was ridiculous, right? A lot of these AIs have been trained using American data. So, the typical American faces, the way we speak here, the way we write here, and And that has really limited what some of it can do. Anyways, we're not going to get into that right now. But the problem that we're finding now with the latest versions of ChatGPT is, it's got a lot larger language model, way larger. It's got more information. Some people say it's more intelligent. Of course, as I've said for a long time, there's no intelligence here, people. So quit looking for it. But what we have also found now is that it is easier to jailbreak these newer versions of OpenAI than some of the older ones. So what's jailbreaking? You might have a smartphone and you might have jailbroken it. It's pretty common, particularly in the Android community. It used to be a lot more common in the Apple community, and then Apple kept locking it down to make it harder to jailbreak. And believe it or not, people, that is a good thing for you, because what that means is it's harder for the bad guys to get into your phone, get on your phone, put stuff on your phone to steal your information, to track you, to do all of that sort of stuff if Apple keeps locking it down every time someone's able to jailbreak the phone. So I'm happy about that. I'm very happy about that, because there's so many repercussions potentially from technology like that. But that's jailbreaking. That's using a device for something it wasn't really designed to do. And jailbreaking, when it comes to AIs, is how do we get around the restrictions these developers have put in place? The obvious ones are things like, how do I make a bomb? And it's going to come back and it's going to say, hey, I can't answer it. In fact, I think the exact text is, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Now, that's interesting, right? So it's not going to help me make a bomb, but let's talk about jailbreaking. You see, if you word the question in such a way that it doesn't think that you're really trying to make a bomb, you can get it to tell you. So that's a jailbreak here. And I've used that before with medical stuff, right? You ask it a kind of a medical question, and it'll come back and it'll say, hey, you go talk to your doctor. Right, you'll get a response. No, that's not the exact response, but you'll get a response like that. But if you say, hey, if we're doing a study and we see these components in a blood test, what might be the likely cause of that? Now it'll give you an answer. And it still might at the end say, talk to a doctor, but it'll give you an answer. That's kind of jailbreaking. And you might have done it yourself if you've ever spent a lot of time on some of these AIs or with some of these AIs. So what Christopher, that's his name, Mouton, told Decrypt, and you'll find this article online at decrypt.com, in an interview is, hey, bottom line, you can use jailbreaking techniques or what's called prompt engineering to get below these safeguards that have been built into all of these different large language models. It's not just OpenAI, ChatGPT, it's Bard, it's all of these. There's a lot of them that are out there right now. So in this RAND study, researchers used these jailbreaking techniques to get the AI models to engage in a conversation about how to cause a mass casualty biological attack using various agents, including smallpox, anthrax, and the bubonic plague. Researchers also asked the AI models to develop a convincing story for why they are purchasing the toxic agents. Yeah, you can see this whole thing from Rand Corporation. If you follow them on X, it's at Rand Corporation, okay? So the team examined the risk of the misuse of these large language models and broke their team up into three pieces. One that was using the internet only to find out how to carry on a terrorist attack. A second group using the internet and an unnamed large language model. And a third team, again, internet and another unnamed large language model, which people might call AIs, okay? So they did this so that they could figure out if the AI models generated these problematic outputs that were different from each other in a meaningful way. On the dark web, by the way, was completely prohibited, right? Print publications had to be online. So they're not trying to figure out if one model is riskier than another. They just wanted to see what happened. So they had 42 AI and cybersecurity experts, which in our biz they call red teams, try and get them to respond with these problematic responses. And sure enough, they were able to get it. Researchers at Brown University discovered that ChatGPT's prompt filters could be circumvented by entering the prompt in less common languages, such as Zulu or Gaelic, instead of in English. So we've got some problems here. This technology is so new, it's not regulated. I don't know that it really could be regulated. There's all kinds of AI potential problems. It goes on and on and on. But we got some serious problems we're going to have to deal with, and this is, to me, very scary. Terrorists using AI to carry out their attacks. Hey, online, CraigPeterson.com. See you there. Many of us are using tools like ChatGPT and have been for a while in order to help us write things, to answer questions, right? If you haven't played with it, you should. ChatGPT, completely free. You can go online, sign up. There used to be waiting lists. There aren't anymore. If you want the latest, greatest, most wonderful, which frankly most people don't need, then you can pay them their monthly little fee and have restricted number of searches per day, which is all well and good, right? I do use the paid versions as well. And I have also access to what they call the playground so that I can put things together from a programming standpoint too. Okay, so there's a lot that you can look at here. But what Google is doing now is really stirring up a pot yet again. You might remember back in the day, a lot of people were upset with Google because Google was going into their websites and was scraping the data from the websites, right? And that's the Google we know and love and have for a long time, where you go into Google and you ask for some sort of information and it'll show you various websites ranked based on what it thinks is going to be the best for you, the best answer. And frankly, that's been powered by a large language model for a very long time. AI has been out there for years and years now. Probably a decade-ish, depends on, where do you want to draw the line? Anyways. So we've now got Google going beyond just showing a snippet of your copyrighted work from your website and moved on to the next step, which is Google now, if you have an access to Google Bard, B-A-R-D, which is Google's large language model. And you can find it at bard.google.com. It's marked as an experiment. But you can log in there. You can create yourself a little Bard account. So now when you do a search on Google, things are a little bit different. And they're different because of the ability to use an AI-powered overview for the search. So, for instance, I'm on my Google search page right now, just any Google search page. I'm logged into my Google account. I have signed up for the free Bard, which is Google's alternative, if you will, to ChatGPT. And both of them, by the way, Bard and ChatGPT, there's a lot of others. But those two big ones have some real differences between each other. No question about it. But right at the top of my page now, it gives me the option to get an AI-powered overview for the search. So I type Craig Peterson Tech Talk up at the top, and guess what? There's a whole bunch of stuff. It shows my podcast and how to subscribe to it, some of the radio stations I'm on, some of the TV networks I'm on. Oh, there's my Twitter account, my Facebook, LinkedIn. It's got pretty much everything. Did a really good job. Oftentimes it messes things up and confuses me with some guy that's a football player or coach or something. I don't know. I don't follow sports. Anyways, this is what we're used to seeing. However, if you want to, there's two new things on the web page. One of them says generate, and that'll give you an AI-powered overview for the search. And it also, so you get down beneath the basics here, it says continue the conversation, where you can ask a follow-up question. So if we say a follow-up, where can I listen to Craig's radio show? And here we go. Up comes. It's generating an AI response. So here it is. That's interesting. Okay, so it's got a bunch of shows that aren't mine, so it really messed that up. So maybe if I asked it a different follow-up question, it would do better, eh? So instead of where can I listen to Craig's radio show, maybe I say can I listen to Craig Peterson's? Where can I listen to Craig Peterson's radio show? Now, this is also demonstrating how it should have had context because of my first question, but it didn't have it. But this stuff is improving so fast, it is going to be out there. So here we go. It's giving me streaming on TuneIn, on my website, and SoundCloud. It didn't give me my iTunes and stuff. I probably should work on making my data a little easier for people to understand. Okay, so if I go back now to Craig Peterson Tech Talk and I say, okay, generate me an AI-powered overview for this search. This is where it's starting to get hairy again. Because whereas people were upset that Google was grabbing a couple of sentences from the website and those sentences were copyrighted, it's even more of a problem now that you can ask it a question via the AI and it is going and taking stuff, not attributing it, although Google's a little better about that, and putting it all together. So I said, who is Craig Peterson, Tech Talk? And the AI-powered overview that Google gave me, that's a free overview, says, Craig Peterson is an experienced cybersecurity consultant and owner of Mainstream Technology Group. For over 35 years, he has worked with business people and government agencies to ensure their data security. So there you go. This is available to you. I like this in many cases, and it does save time because it's giving you the answer to your question. So you no longer have to scroll down through all of these little web page snippets and then click on the ones that you think might be giving you the information that you need. So now there is also another problem. And that problem is, well, how about all of these people that have websites like me, right? I got a website. And you don't have to click on my website to find out that I'm an experienced cybersecurity consultant, right? And I've got more than 35 years, well, quite a few more actually, in cybersecurity for business and government agencies. So I put that information up there. Google, Bard, and OpenAI and all these others went ahead and grabbed that information off of my website, and yet I'm not getting credit for it. The people are not visiting my website. They're not signing up for my newsletter because they visited the website and said, oh my gosh, this information is so marvelous. I wish Craig would send me his weekly free newsletter. Or, man, Craig's opinion is so valuable, I'm going to sign up for his paid newsletter. No, none of that, right? So now Bard and these other large language models are taking all of this information that people have written, and believe me, it takes a lot of time. I've got thousands of hours into my website, no question about it, and my podcast. And yet Google is taking all of that and is basically calling it their own, where they generate answers to questions using the data that I put together. Do you see how this is a problem? So from a user standpoint, it's really nice. And as I said, I've used this before. This generative AI tie-in, absolutely free. Go to bard.google.com. But on the other side, what's going to happen to content generation? We've already got problems with funding for podcasts. The amount of people buying advertising on podcasts has flown or just dropped through the floor. I don't accept advertising on my podcast, by the way, but it's not there anymore. So what's going to happen to content when content creators are not paid to create content? Well, unless you're like me and trying to help, and there's lots of those, that content's going to disappear, isn't it? Another big problem thanks to AI. Great article that I grabbed out of Town Hall here a few weeks ago. I hadn't had time to get to it. But, electric cars and trucks are a total crock, okay? Cool technology. If you want one, buy one. But don't think that you're being green or environmentally conscious by doing that, because you are not. It is a problem, frankly. It is a very big problem. So there is a great little article that was in, as I said here, the paper here, Town Hall, and it's talking about this guy. I've got to read you a couple of parts of that, okay? So this guy, he's a resident of Winnipeg, up in Canada, southern Canada, right? Everybody in Canada lives in the south, at least almost everybody. He bought an electric Ford F-150 for $85,000 and was forced to abandon it after discovering it wasn't worth the cost. Moreover, it's not for working people who want to spend an arm and a leg installing the charging station in their home. This guy, Delber, spent around $130,000 on this green initiative, with the bonus of discovering that the fast charging stations only charges batteries up to 90%. Also, it's more expensive to recharge these vehicles than refueling a gas-powered car. Bala declared electric vehicles were the biggest scam of modern times. He said that on Fox Business. He told Fox Business that he needed the vehicle for his work, but also wanted something suitable for recreational activities, such as driving to his cabin or going fishing. He also wanted an environmentally friendly vehicle, as owning one is, quote, responsible citizenship these days, end quote. But Bala was quickly hit with the reality of owning and operating an EV. Soon after his purchase, the vehicle compelled him to install 2 chargers, one at work and one at home, for $10,000. To accommodate the charger, he had to upgrade his home's electric panel for $6,000. Oh, and by the way, that $130,000 that he spent on this little electric vehicle project did not include the taxes. So not long after that purchase, he got into a minor accident, which he said required light assembly on the front bumper. Bala took the vehicle to the body shop and did not get it back for 6 months. He said no one from Ford answered his email or phone calls for help. The limitations of his electric truck became even more apparent when Bala embarked on a chaotic 1,400-mile road trip to Chicago. Fast charging stations, which only charge EVs up to 90%, cost more than gas for the same mileage. On the family's first stop in Fargo, North Dakota, it took 2 hours and $56 to charge his vehicle. The charge was good for another 215 miles. On the second stop, in Albertville, Minnesota, the free charger was faulty and the phone number on the charging station was of no help, he said. The family drove to another charging station in Elk River, Minnesota, but the charger was faulty there as well. This reminds me of Pete Buttigieg, who is our czar here for all things dealing with transportation, and he's allocated some $150 million for charging stations because he can't charge his vehicle either. Quote, this sheer helplessness was mind-boggling, Bala wrote in an online post. My kids and wife are really worried and stressed at this point. I've heard some people say that the best time when you have an electric vehicle is when you buy it and it's fully charged. From then on out, it's white knuckle time until you charge it again. So how did this 1,400-mile trip to Chicago end? The truck died. Bala got towed to a nearby Ford dealership where he rented a gas-powered car to finish the trek to the city. And of course, Ford says that geography and weather can impact driving range. Yeah, no kidding. Like weather in the Northeast where it gets really cold, or in the South where it gets really hot. So not ideal for winter travel or for long distances. It's not a practical car. Never was, never will be. Kill it before more people waste their hard-earned money on this nonsense. Isn't that something? And I have to agree with this. I've seen this sort of thing over and over and over again. It's a real problem. Now, let's get into the next article here. This is from, I've had this sitting here for a little while, from August 2023. Texas. They've got a power grid. I think Texas and California, I'm not sure who has more, but the two of them have the most so-called green energy production of all of the states in the union. And that, of course, is solar, and that is wind. You might remember a couple of years ago now, Texas had a cold snap and almost destroyed its entire grid. 3 minutes away from people being without power for months. That's how bad it was because of the reliance on wind energy. And getting rid of some of these coal, gas, and nuclear plants is not a good idea, people, okay? So this summer, the Texas Power Grid operator, it's called ERCOT, Electric Reliability Council of Texas, asked the residents to reduce energy usage because it was hot. It was hot in Texas. Yeah, can you believe that? So they said, hey, reduce to avoid rolling blackouts. Now, this company manages electric power to more than 26 million Texas customers. That's 90% of the state's electric load. Temperatures got hot, 115 plus degrees. I've been in Texas when it's been that hot before. Yeah, okay. So why did they issue this voluntary conservation notice? Well, due to extreme temperatures, forecasted high demand, and lower reserves due to low wind generation. Yeah, the wind turbines, once again, were not producing enough electricity. So what did they do? Well, they raised their prices 6,000% for electricity. It was almost at the $5,000 per megawatt hour price cap, if you can believe that, okay? So the spot prices jumped to almost $5,000 per megawatt hour from an average of $75, okay? Can you believe that? So people ended up getting stuck with huge electric bills that were not expecting it. Can you imagine if you got nailed with a 6,000% increase in your electric bill, even if it's only for one day of the month? Yeah, it's really kind of crazy, isn't it? So that's Texas for you. That's your wind power. That's your solar power. There's a lot of people that are working on, okay, how do we level this out? Because as it turns out, there's no sun at night, so solar doesn't do you any good at night. And there's not much wind at night usually because the wind is caused by that giant orb in the sky. It heats up, right? Makes the air start to flow up and down, and all of the drafts create wind, which run the wonderful wind turbines. So in other words, the sun's responsible pretty much for all of it, okay? So what do you do then? Well, I heard an interview, this was an interesting one, with a lady who's the head of a company that was spun off of Google, and it was one of Google's X projects, and this is like in 2019, I think they spun off, and what they were going to do is put these small turbines in the Mississippi River. So think of a big turbine, in a power dam. So they're going to have a whole bunch of these submerged just below the water. Obviously, they don't want to block the Mississippi River from the transportation that it provides, right? So they didn't want to block the main channels or anything. And then they found they couldn't really do it. It just wasn't feasible economically with the technology they had. So they've moved on. Now, we've talked before about these new nuclear power plants, which are absolutely amazing. These small ones made in a factory, good specs, they're good for 20 years. You can literally bury them in a small community, dig it up in 20 years and replace it. It's recyclable, the whole plant, right? And it can't melt down. It's just amazing what they're doing. But some of these nuclear plants are using liquid salt. As it turns out, it actually doesn't take that much heat to liquefy some of these salt blends, like 500 degrees Celsius, which is a lower temperature than the gas generation plants run at. So what they're looking to do is take some of these old gas-powered turbines, or some of the even older ones, the coal-burning ones, or perhaps even nuclear, where you have all of the grid right there, transformers, substations ready for you. You've already got a gas turbine that runs off of steam that was made by gas or whatever. And then this is the cool part. They can store the energy. And how do they store it? Well, they basically use a heat pump. They take electricity off of the grid when there's an excess production, which is, frankly, most of the day. There's a big peak in the morning. There's a big peak when people get back from work. Other than that, it's pretty smooth. And then you've got the overnight, right? And they take that extra electricity, use it to liquefy the salt, and then they keep the salt moving and let it stay hot. And then when they need the extra power, they then heat up the water, make the steam, run the turbine, and feed power back to the grid. Very, very cool idea. And what's, I think, particularly neat about it is, in some areas, like they're starting this over in Spain, because Europe has so much of this wind power and Spain solar power that they have stopped the installation of new solar power, and they will pay you to take the extra electricity generated during the daytime. So these new plants will be able to get free electricity and store it effectively until it's needed at night, or maybe during a cold day or a hot day in Texas. Hey, online, craigpeterson.com/subscribe. I've had this email address now that I am still using for more than 30 years, a very long time. So I get a lot of emails. And I thought, well, maybe it was just me, because I've been using this email address since, I think, 92, give or take. So why am I getting these, and are other people getting them? And I've asked around a little bit and got some feedback. Yeah, it's happening. And then I had a couple of calls from clients, and this is what's got me concerned here over the last week. And that is, apparently these are spreading like wildfire. I had one client who has a new accountant, and she called me up because she got an email and she wasn't quite sure if it was legitimate or not. It was an invoice, and it was an invoice for one of the buildings that they have. They have 3 locations, saying that they owed, I think it was like $600 or maybe $800 in order to get heating oil this winter, and they needed to pay it right away. And at the top, it had a legitimate business name and the logo. And in fact, if you went to online, you did a search for that business name, sure enough, they came up, and yeah, it's the same logo. But when she dug in a little bit deeper, she found that it had a different phone number on the invoice than was on their website. And that's when she started to really start to wonder and gave us a call. Now, we looked with some detail at the headers on the email. You might be familiar with email headers. They can usually be used to dig in and find out which server did they originate from that email, what servers did it go through, what kind of anti-spam testing was applied to it, and, putting all of that stuff together. And it's important to do all of that, frankly, to have a close look at it. So that's what we did. And we found out, okay, wait a minute here. This came from a Microsoft-hosted domain. Now, remember, Microsoft, with their Microsoft 365 crazy, bad, ridiculous product, not that I have an opinion on the matter, allows small businesses to set up their own email domain. And life is good from that point on, except that, of course, their security is just being under so much heavy fire for very, very good reason, particularly if you only buy the base licenses from Microsoft. We've talked before about how Microsoft 365 doesn't guarantee that your data is going to stay intact, that it isn't going to be lost. Microsoft has lost data from some very big corporations who sued them, and the corporations lost in court. Microsoft won because it's quite clear, we don't do backups of your data. Anyhow, the emails that ended up in the hands of the accountant were legitimately delivered from a Microsoft-hosted domain. So when you look at it, even when you're digging in from the technical side, the emails all looked okay going all the way through. So somebody spent some time on this. And so when the accountant called me up, I asked her, hey, is this a company you've dealt with before? Now remember, she was a new accountant at this client. And the new accountant said, I don't really know. And I told her, well, the first thing to do is check to see if this is an actual vendor, right? Do they actually deliver the heating oil to the office? And if they do, then maybe it might be legitimate. But ask them if it's a legitimate invoice or not. And so, so she did that. And they said no. And I also told her, well, ask the business owner if you don't know and see if he has an idea about this. And he said, no, they are not a legitimate provider for us. So when she called them up, she told them, hey, listen, somebody's sending out invoices on what looks to be your letterhead, if you will, your invoice head with your logo representing as you, and is trying to get me to pay the bill. So I dug into that more, and I wrote a really kind of a detailed article here about my favorite ways to protect yourself from falling victim to these types of scams. And I've got right in there, if you go, you have to click through from the newsletter to my website, but there's 6 different points. And I try to make them unique, right? There's the obvious ones, and I try not to emphasize those because we talk about it so much, but, using unique passwords and stuff. But with something like this, how do you know if it's a legitimate email, a legitimate invoice? I've got all kinds of samples. I've just been saving all of these phishing emails for years. So I've got many, many samples. And some of these samples are from PayPal, supposedly, where I need to pay my PayPal invoice. Others have been for Bitcoin that I bought, and I needed to Venmo some money over for Bitcoin, and some of the others as well. There are thousands of these people out there who are trying to get you to send them money. So I want to really warn you about it. It is out there. It is a big deal. Do not give out any personal information unless you're the one that has initiated contact with what's effectively a trusted source. So how do you do that? Well, it's old school, everybody. When you're looking at the invoice, look old school. Even though the invoice may come in an email, it may have a PDF, and some people print them up and, still do the old paperwork on them. But double check to make sure it's correct. Another thing that we've seen is invoices have been stolen. So it's the invoice template, if you will, or the emails that had that PDF in it or the invoices in it. So the account was compromised. And I've seen this. It's happening. It could happen to you. And then what the bad guys do is they put onto the bottom of this little message that says, oh, our ACH number has changed. If you're an accountant, you know what that is, a bookkeeper, a business owner, because that's the way you can transfer funds directly for very little cost. It's not like wiring money. It's nowhere near as expensive. And it's almost instant as well. It's pretty darn quick. So what they'll do is they'll take the invoice, a legitimate invoice from a legitimate vendor of yours, and they'll modify that so that at the bottom it has maybe a different bank account number, or it says, like the one that I just saw, that they've changed their ACH destination, and here it is. So you then think, well, I thought I paid that invoice, or maybe I haven't paid it yet. Then you send the money to the bad guys directly. The money goes very, very quickly. According to the FBI, once it's in the bad guys' hands, it's usually out of the country in about 90 seconds. And many of these bad guys own banks. Isn't that crazy? So if you're trying to claw that money back, once it hits their bank, it's gone, right? You'll never, ever see it again. So initiate a phone call yourself. Call them up on the phone. You don't have to use that rotary dial phone or that touch tone phone that may be hiding somewhere there in the office, right? You can use your smartphone, your cell phone, but look them up online again, right? We don't have yellow pages or white pages anymore. Although I did get one a couple of years ago. It was kind of surprising. And it was from a third party. It wasn't a real, if you will, yellow pages from the phone company. But look them up online. Give them a call. Maintain a relationship with the vendors that way, okay? Now, if anybody calls claiming to be from a company asking for sensitive data, especially if it appears out of place, don't provide them with anything until their identity has been verified independently through official channels. Now, I had an interesting call this week, too. One of my people who does tech support called up a client and told the client, hey, I'm from Mainstream, and I had to make a couple of changes to your email account. So I had to reset your password. I have a new password for you. You ready to take it down? Okay, there you go. Thanks. And then afterwards, she realized, maybe that other person, because they seemed a little edgy, thought maybe this was a scam call. Maybe Mainstream wasn't really their provider, right? We have some clients that are pretty big. Not all of the employees have ever even heard of us before. And when it boiled down to it, though, it wasn't my tech calling up, asking them for their password, because she didn't. It was my tech calling up and telling them what their new password was. So you see the difference? So a call like she made can be perfectly legitimate. In fact, it was legitimate. But calls where they call you up and ask for your password are not. And I have seen that where they say, hey, we're doing upgrades. We're going to upgrade your Windows, your Word, whatever it is this weekend. And so I just need your username and password so I can log into your computer and check it after we're all done. And guess what? Yeah, it was the bad guys, right? Those hosers trying to hose all of that money out of your account. Hey, I want you to get this list of things that you can do to protect yourself from these types of scams. It's absolutely free. You can go to my website at craigpeterson.com. But I have things like this, tips every week that you can get for free by going to craigpeterson.com/subscribe. Get my insider show notes and my tips, craigpeterson.com/subscribe right now. Nothing wrong with Reddit per se. It's just a place where they'll post all of this personal information so that they can shame you or embarrass you, or in some cases come after you with criminal intent. Now, speaking of criminal, It is illegal to dox someone in California if it rises to the level of online harassment. But personal information that's publicly available is, and legally obtained, obviously, is typically not a crime in most states. Now, where doxing has really shown up and bothers me, maybe even the most, isn't public figures so much, although obviously it happens. You know, we've seen these protesters in front of Supreme Court justices' homes. If you're a left-wing protester, you could be right there in front of the house. If you're a right-wing protester, you got to be a few blocks away from the house. But in either case, they know where the justice lives. And how about your kids or grandkids? Where are they in the doxing scale? Well, you know, there's a lot of mean kids out there. And I was bullied growing up. Probably almost everybody was bullied by somebody. And I had a problem. They knew where I lived, and they would get me coming to school, usually in the morning, sometimes coming home from school in the evening. And it got pretty bad. They pulled 2x4s on me. I had knife pulled and put to my throat, just all kinds of stuff, right? So that's a problem. But at least I could try and alter my way home to get around the bullies. It didn't last for the whole school experience, right? And they moved on. They got bored, and life was okay at that point. But how about our kids and grandkids who have smartphones and have people at school or elsewhere that really don't like them, that want to embarrass them, that want to harass them? They can't get away from those phones. They are addictive, quite literally addictive. And I've read some studies on the chemicals and the chemical interactions, but the chemicals that are released in your brain that cause you to really become addicted. And how many people do you see that are scrolling through messages or who are playing video games all of the time, you know, as much as they possibly can? It's a real big deal. So doxing, which is also sometimes called dropping docs, document, right? Doxing is a problem. So I went online and looked up a little bit more, and I wrote an article about it as well, so you can find out a little bit more. But I love this article from 404 Media Co., and it is talking about doxing and the problems that you can run into. Here's a picture that they have on their website that, again, I've got a link to it in my newsletter. But it's a photo of a mask. It's got this black mask and a box of 45 auto rounds. Okay? And it's meant to be a threat to whomever that was sent to. And, you know, it can just be a stupid kid being stupid. But it could also be something legitimate that you've got to be careful of. So this guy who wrote the article said he went on to Telegram. He went into a Telegram channel that is known for doxing. That's where you go if you want to find out the information about somebody. And he entered in their name and the state that he believed this person lived in and hit enter. And then the bot spat out a file containing every address that person had ever lived at in the U.S., all the way back to their college dorm more than a decade earlier. The file included the names and birth years of the relatives. It listed the target's mobile phone numbers and provider, as well as personal email addresses. Finally, the file contained information from their driver's license, including its unique identification number. All of that cost $15 in Bitcoin. And the bot also offers, if they have it, the Social Security number, too, for $20. Can you imagine that? And for you to get your reputation back after someone has stolen your identity can take you 300 hours. And most of the time, people don't even bother trying to get it all cleared up, unless, of course, there's being theft, or they bought a house in your name, or they sold your house that you're living in because they have all that information. Where does this come from? And that's the interesting part to me. We know that the credit bureaus like Experian and Equifax and TransUnion, those are the three big ones, have all of this information. All right. Well, it's supposed to be kept confidential, isn't it? Well, we're not going to get into Equifax and the massive hack that they had. They lost, I think it was over 200 million people's personal information. Okay, so that's one way the bad guys can get it. They can get it on the dark web. They can buy one of these data dumps or thefts. But through what this author here at 404media.co is saying, through a complex web of agreements and purchases, that data trickles down from the credit bureaus to other companies who offer it to debt collectors, insurance companies, and law enforcement. We've talked before here about how federal agencies, including the FBI, who are not allowed to track us and get personal information and keep those files unless they've got an explicit reason, right? They have reason to suspect, but they're still not allowed to collect a lot of that data. They just go to these places and buy it. Isn't that amazing? So this particular Telegram channel has tapped into that, okay? They've gotten some of this data apparently by stealing former law enforcement officers' identity, and they're selling unfettered access to the criminal cohorts online. Isn't that something? So if you want to find out where the cop that arrested you lives, what the job is, where he's been, his wife, children, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, you can probably find it. So they tested it looking for information on Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Joe Biden, and it got it. It got it. And 404 Media, this website, verified that although not always sensitive, at least some of that data is accurate. Wow, eh? So there, some of these communities, the tools advertised in include these swatting rooms where people will call 911 and coerce a SWAT team to get involved, right? To go on out and break down your door, and then the nastiness happens. So be very, very careful online. Make sure you get my newsletter. This was in the newsletter. Don't miss the next one. They're absolutely free. I'm not pushing something on you. I'm just trying to keep you informed. Go online to craigpeterson.com/subscribe right now and sign up right there, craigpeterson.com. I think I should start by kind of explaining a little bit more about what's going on with these wonderful credit reporting agencies. Basically, what they've done is they've come up with a way around the laws as they stand. And they're getting around those, obviously, so they can make some extra money. Right? That's my opinion, but I think it's pretty obvious to almost anybody. And TransUnion, for instance, is aware of its brand recognition in the criminal underground. TransUnion said, at times, fraudsters will pull data from other sources and misrepresent it as our data. Okay. But here's the problem above all of that stuff. There is, on top of all of this mechanism that they have set up that allows people, businesses and others, to be able to get at some of this information. And it's more or less legal, okay? So this is a bit of a problem. But these criminals have access to a tool over at TransUnion called TLOXP. And the direct relationship with TransUnion and the direct ability for TransUnion through that TLOXP tool gives them direct access to your data. Now, that's a bit of a problem here. In one of the few well-documented cases of abuse of this TransUnion tool, Forbes covered how an amateur rap crew used it as part of $1 million fraud spree in 2018. That was years ago. Now, that's a little bit of a problem, isn't it? And talk in this channel that we were talking about here at 404 Media, in that channel over at Telegram, is that the TLXOXP is the database that has really caught on by the criminal underground. Now, that's obviously a very, very big problem. They've got all of this stuff, okay? The criminals also mentioned using some different companies in these Telegram groups that they claim to use: DataTrack, SearchBug, US Info Search. Now, again, there's tools that are made available to skip tracers, people who try and find you, creditors, etc., who you might owe money to, and they want to know where you're at, and so they want to be able to find your relations and go talk to them, put the squeeze on them, right? Data brokers who are supplying data to private investigators, right? So the PI is their customer, and they'll go and do on-site visits, etc., right? It's really something, okay? So do you want to know what they do to qualify you as a private investigator? Well, they'll go on site to the private investigator's office, and then they'll make sure they have a locked filing cabinet and a shredder to properly handle records. All right? Now, DataTrack said at the time of the criminal gaining access to this massive data trove from the credit agency, all the company did was a remote confirmation where the applicants asked to provide various pieces of identity and security verification virtually rather than in person. So you can see all of the holes in this. It's just crazy when you start really digging into it. And this goes on and on. Now, let's talk about protecting yourself, because once your data is out there, and unfortunately most of our data is because these credit bureaus did not keep our data safe. And if you were part of the class action suit, you might have gotten literally a few bucks. But and you had to prove, by the way, that you had spent all of this time and spent all of this money to try and recover your identity. Hopefully you kept good records of those 300 hours that are estimated in order to recover everything. But even then, they won't give you money for your time, just for any direct costs, like if you hired someone like a private investigator to do a little bit more for you. Right? A racket. 200 plus million people, their data was stolen. And does Equifax fire anybody? Does anybody go to jail? No. Now, there's a company out there that I have been asked about before. It's called Delete Me. Seems to be a pretty decent company. 404 Media talks about it here in this article. And they have new services all of the time over at Delete Me, and some are a little better than others. But the problem is, we're talking about a game of whack-a-mole. Your data is out there. It's on the dark web. It may be available for free, and you can check that, by the way, yourself for free by going to haveibeenpwned.com, haveibeenpwned.com. Great site, trustworthy site. Troy Hunt runs it. Check it out, haveibeenpwned.com. So you can see if your data is out there on the dark web. Obviously out there in the dark web, right? There may be places that Troy isn't aware of, but how do you get the credit bureaus to stop selling your information? It can be really, really difficult. So a lot of people have turned to Delete Me. It's not a total waste, but it's frankly almost impossible to have them delete everything about you entirely. And, here that's a problem, right? Because according to Delete Me's Gilmore, he said that the credit bureaus will not remove you from the data sets, but they will not sell it in certain conditions. And the bureaus make it really onerous to try and get out of there. They never purge the header data. And that's the data that they're selling, by the way, the header data, which has all kinds of personal information on you. Header data sounds so innocent, doesn't it? but it's not. That's the data that has all of this information that the fraudsters need. It might not have detailed information, but of course that tool that we're just talking about does have all of that information in it as well that are being used by the bad guys, that TLOXP tool. So almost impossible to remove. You can check out Delete Me. It's probably a good idea for you to do that. There needs to be more regulation here because this is our private information, and once it's gone, we're never going to get it back. And I don't know. I don't think it's too late for you, but it might be. But, you got to do something, right? So how do you protect yourself from doxing? Well, first of all, try and get the credit bureaus to remove your data from their systems, or at least to stop selling it. So you got to contact all 3 of the major credit reporting bureaus. You need to go in to your social media accounts, and you need to make sure that your profiles, your usernames are private so that people aren't going to be able to find you. That's terrible, but neither are the bad guys. Obviously, remove any addresses, places of work, specific locations from your accounts, anything that helps to identify you. Do not have it in any of your settings, and also do not have any posts with any of that information. We've talked before about how it's a problem for people to post, hey, I'm going on vacation next week, because the bad guys might be watching that, right? They might be targeting you, the business you work for, the business you own. Set your posts to friends only, and just those simple things are going to go a long way. But check it out online. You'll find it, again, at 404media.co. Make sure you're on my email list, get my weekly emails, and you will be in front of all of this nastiness. As my wife constantly says, the cloud is just a word for another person's computer. And a computer that you don't control is what I really add on to that. Microsoft 365 being a really great example. Microsoft has what they call a shared responsibility for your data. And a lot of people just assume, hey, I'm paying Microsoft, whatever it is, 10, 20, 30 bucks a month for my email account and SharePoint and my Teams rooms and everything else. So I'm all set, right? And of course, the answer to that is no, yet you are not all set. The Microsoft user agreement does not provide that they are not going to lose your data, that your data is not going to be ransomed. And there are a number of cases. I was just doing a search online where they're talking about how Microsoft really messed up, and they've had a lot of lawsuits over it where they lost data. Now, one of the things, too, that it can be a real problem when you get right down to it is the backup of the data. Microsoft will kind of more or less maybe keep your data around, your emails around, your files, the things in your OneNote and OneDrive. But in reality, a lot of that stuff is it does not have any sort of guarantee from Microsoft. And they do lose it. In fact, they lost from one of the big accounting firms records of thousands of their employees and, of course, their customers, those employees' customers. And Microsoft wasn't going to do anything about it because they don't do anything like that. The other real thing that's confusing about the Microsoft 365 stuff is the levels that they have, right? They have a whole bunch of different business levels, enterprise and regular users, and they all come with different abilities, including you can get more in security if you want it, and then you, of course, got to configure it all and set it all up. But Microsoft 365 has become just incredibly commonplace in business. Now, what we do for our customers is I go in and we have a backup program that we run in our own owned data center. So your data, right? Our customers' data never leaves our hands. But we run these programs that go out to Microsoft 365 and pull down everything, all of the information from Microsoft 365, and then store it locally. And we have had to do restores for our customers. Now, somewhere around 80% of the time, apparently, it's a user that messed up. They deleted a whole bunch of stuff, and Microsoft does have the ability to do restores, which is good, right? And those restorers are hopefully okay, but the restorers are just of deleted emails or deleted files, and they're only kept for about 30 days. It kind of depends on your license and what the data is. And if you don't notice it for more than 30 days, you're completely out of luck. The same thing's true when it comes to lawsuits on some of this stuff, okay? So it's very, very commonplace for people to use Microsoft 365, but businesses and individuals don't realize what they're getting into, right? The basics are not covered when it comes to cloud backup and recovery. And Microsoft is not giving you any sort of a warranty about losing your data. And what happens if they get ransomed, which can happen, there's no question about it. So you can't count on Microsoft yet again, right? I'm not a Microsoft fan. You guys already know that. But they've come a long ways, so that's a good thing from Ballmer days and Bill Gates days. But there's two hard truths that you really need to consider here when you're planning on using the cloud. And I've been talking about Microsoft and picking on them, but it's true for any cloud service. It can be anything. It could be Salesforce.com, many, many others. You have to make sure you step up and accept the responsibility for the safekeeping of your data. That means you've got to go through, configure it as safely as you can, and then you've got to download your data and put all of your data somewhere locally so that you have it somewhere hopefully safe and encrypted locally, right? All of that stuff's true. And if you don't keep it safe, well, it's your fault. It's kind of what it boils down to. So shared responsibility is just crazy. Because if you're trusting Microsoft to do this, you could lose access to your intellectual property, right? Your patent information, legal information, accounting information. You might no longer be in compliance if you're in a regulated industry, if you've lost access to certain information. If the entire company loses access to emails, there's an attorney who sued Microsoft for $1.75 million, a guy out of New Jersey, because Microsoft had blocked him out of his email, so he could not correspond with the courts or with his clients. So now there's a potential problem here of ethical violations. Yeah, I know. Attorneys and ethics, right? Yeah, okay, I get it. You don't have to point that out. But they for months blocked him from getting in, and he called their tech support people. I did that for one of my clients that had lost a lot of emails, that spam was being sent out from their tenant, and just a terrible, terrible situation. And so we opened a ticket with Microsoft, and we spoke to a really nice guy at Microsoft, and he knew nothing about any of this stuff. And frankly, I think he was just kind of, trying to give us a hug and help us along. They never resolved any of the issues, ever. It's crazy. And we reached out to them 2 more times. I did personally. And we never got any resolution from them. The most recent one, and I've just given up on her, is a lady who claims to be calling me, right? And so the phone rings, I answer the phone, hello, hello, hello. And after 30 seconds, she hangs up. And so I sent an email saying, what's going on here? Oh, I tried calling. Okay, well, call back again, because I'd already filed 2 other tickets. Microsoft was able to reach me at that phone, no problem. I know there's no problem with the phone. So a couple of days later, she calls back, of course, after 5 p.m., thinking I'm not going to be working. And I answer the phone, hello, 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 this is Craig, hello. And she hangs up again, right? It's so annoying. And I never did end up resolving anything with her. And you can't report them, right? I have a daughter who runs a major call center, and this is a problem that they've had too, where people will call and the person answering the phone doesn't want to talk. I just don't feel like it today. And so they do the same thing. They just sit there with their microphone on mute, waiting for the caller to hang up. And in my case, I hung up once after 30 seconds of saying hello. In the other case, she hung up on me. And then the third case, well, she's just left a voicemail. It's so annoying. But they fire people like that ultimately, right? They have to put them on report and blah, blah, blah. So you could lose the entire company. Access could lose to emails, SharePoint, other apps. Salesforce is based on multiple automations that have been built into Microsoft, and those are going to have to be rebuilt. It just goes on and on. So it's a word of warning. This whole, quote, shared responsibility thing means it isn't shared. Microsoft is pushing the responsibility for the safety and security of your data on you. And again, that's true for most of the cloud backup, or not cloud backup, but the cloud providers out there. So keep an eye on that if you are using cloud anything, all right? Online backup for Microsoft 365 is crazy important. Now, ransomware is expected to reach $1.75 trillion in payouts 2025. Isn't that something? Microsoft 365, as of right now, is somewhere around 300 million users. You can tell by that they're making a whole lot of money, aren't they, on their Microsoft 365. But you got to be careful, too, because what if you have insider threats? What if you end up in a lawsuit? Do you have access to the email accounts from people that no longer work for you? All right? There's so many things to consider, and there's some good advice you can find online. You can poke around. If you want some more advice, as always, just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. I am here to help, no question. I'll help anybody. We'll get on a phone call. I'm not going to charge you for it because I don't want you to get into these really, really tough positions that so many people have been, have frankly found themselves in over the years. So important stuff there. Now, I also was talking about the Kennesaw State University election hacks. This is in Georgia. And this is very, very detailed. It's an article from the Gateway Pundit, and it talks in detail about how the election machines were hacked. And the Kennesaw State University had them, knew they were hackable, and that they had been hacked, and they reported it to the FBI, who really didn't pay any attention. Apparently, this is according to the article in the Gateway Pundit, the FBI never even looked into it. They closed the case without any consideration. Just crazy. Tons of security holes. EVs, the Biden administration now, they are going to be buying cobalt, which is a rare earth mineral that's needed to make electric vehicles, as well as many other battery-powered things, by using child labor in unsafe mines. And then I've got a great article that I put up on my website, important for business people, about securing your data, keeping the business safe. I've broken it down to some nice, simple steps. CraigPeterson.com. You'll see it if you dig in past the homepage. All right, everybody, sign up right now. CraigPeterson.com/subscribe. Take care.